Hello everybody and welcome back to the Scots-word YouTube channel, and this is a video all about Fury of Dracula, but unlike most of my other videos this is not going to be a full gameplay. I know you can see a game on the screen right now, but this is the AI playing the game, and somehow they found Dracula on the first day. Gotta love the AI. Um, so this game playing here is just so you have something to look at if you want something to look at while I'm talking. This was an idea that I've had for a little while, but then because of getting really close to my holidays, I decided I'm not going to have time to do this. But then recently things have changed in the Discord community, and we've had a lot of new players joining. And I feel then this is maybe the right time to actually do this video after all. I've been wanting to do guides as well as full gameplays on the channel, but the issue with it is I don't really know how much I can really, add to the conversation. I'm sure quite a lot of you will know Quincy Morris, but if you haven't, you can check out his channel. I'll leave a link to it in the description of this video. And he's already done guides about all the Hunter event cards and how Hunter should play, and like the Dracula encounters and all that sort of thing. And also combat guides as well. At the moment, I don't feel I have much to add to that conversation. So because of that, I'm not going into that territory. Maybe in the future, after I've played more games and got more experience, if I have some different opinions to Quincy, then maybe, or other people, then I will do that. But for the moment, I won't. But a little gap in the market that I saw was guides for new players, not in terms of how to play the game, but in terms of like mentality and like what to expect by playing this game. I've only been playing Fury of Dracula for about 3.5 months now. So I still consider myself to be a fairly new player, but then again, in those 3.5 months, I've played just under 100 games, so maybe, in terms of experience, maybe I can't really call myself a new player anymore. What I wanted to do was to make a video for new players who discovered the game for the first time, basically like what to expect. I'm going to try and do this all in one take, so we'll see how this goes. I've got a list in front of me here with 10 little things I want to sort of highlight to new players. But I haven't got a script to follow, so we'll see how this goes, and hopefully it won't be too long. Just to make this clear, this video is not a guide in the sense of how the game works in terms of rules, or how you should do combat, or Hunter strategy, or Dracula strategy. If that's what you want, I recommend going and finding other videos for that. Okay, this is purely an advice if you're a new player who's just picked up the game. I'm going to be talking about it from the perspective of the digital version of the game. But I think some of these things could apply to the physical version of Fury of Dracula as well. But to be honest, if you've got the digital version, you're more likely to be playing more often, and because of that, these things might be a little bit more applicable. Whereas if you're playing as the physical version, where you're playing less frequently, then maybe these things won't be so relevant. And you're playing within the same group of people, it's maybe not so relevant. So yeah, we'll just get started. So the first thing I want to say was the AI. Talking of which, we've got an AI game up here. It's really important for new players to understand that playing against the AI and playing against human players is just a completely different type of game. I've had some new players joining recently where they play against the AI and they're shocked. Then when they play against real players, how difficult it is and how intense it is by comparison. So when you first get the game, absolutely feel free to play games against the AI, and if you want to keep playing against the AI all the time, that's entirely your choice, of course. The AI is good for certain things. The AI is good for firstly getting used to the UI, like the user interface, as Dracula and as the Hunters, because sometimes it can catch you out, and it's caused issues in the past where that Dracula wants a vampire to mature, but then they click the wrong button, then it doesn't mature, and all this sort of thing. So, and even me as a more experienced player, I still make mistakes with the UI if I'm not concentrating properly. So, using the AI games to get used to the UI, then that's absolutely fine, because the UI can be a little bit confusing at times. The AI is also good just to practice like general setups. Like I did that when I first started the game, and I started finding like full gameplays on YouTube, and people would give me advice. I would just go into an AI game and play like the first week, just practicing like the hunter setup, different locations, just getting into the mindset of supplying all the time and all that sort of thing. Or as Dracula, getting practice of just looking at the encounters and trying to work out what sort of trail, what sort of order of encounters you want to put down. So it's good for that sort of stuff, but obviously the challenge of playing against a human player is just a completely different level to the AI. So just be aware of that if that's the case. The next thing as well is if you are going to play, especially if you're going to play player v player, make sure you learn the rules beforehand. In the Discord community that we have, that Nomad Games is set up for Fury of Dracula, in general, we're a really nice bunch, and we're very friendly towards new players, and we're more than happy to help them with the game. But the important thing is, like, from my perspective, like, it makes, if I'm trying to teach somebody how to play the game, it makes my life so much easier if they understand the rules more or less. Of course, there are lots of like really small interactions with this game which even I don't know, and you learn them as you go along, and that's fine. But I think it's important that you have a basic idea of what needs to happen. Because if you're trying to, in your first game, if you're trying to learn the rules and the user interface and then strategy on top of it, wow, that's a lot of things to take in. So there's rules references. I think there might be a rules reference in the main menu of the game, or check out the rules references online. There are small differences between the board game version, especially the third and fourth edition of the game. I think there's a lot of changes with the game between first, second, and third edition. If you look at the rules for third edition or fourth edition, they're more or less what the digital version of Fury of Dracula uses. Now, there are some things which you'll pick up, but more or less it's the same. Okay, so look up the rules reference, and then once you've got the rules, then you can then, when you meet, when you do your first PvP matches, then it could be more of a concentration on strategy and things like that, rather than teaching the game rules. There might be of course you can ask more questions about game rules, but it just makes it easier that you're not having to learn two things at once. So you can focus on strategy. But as I said, even as you get more experience with the game, just be aware that you're going to come across sort of like new interactions that you didn't expect, or sometimes when you got two events interacting, it's like, well, which one's going to trigger first? Sometimes it can be a bit weird and maybe not exactly intuitive, but that's just the way it is, and it keeps you on your toes. The next thing too, this is not a shameless plug, by the way. Well, it is a shameless plug. I'll plug my channel, but do watch like full gameplays and guides. When I started, I found them incredibly helpful, especially for a game like Fury of Dracula, which has quite a steep learning curve, and there's a lot of strategy and like deduction and bluffing involved. Watching full gameplays can be very interesting and hopefully very informative. And also, as you're watching other players play, you also gain insights into how they play. Like, because even though players will have their own individual way of doing things, so you can actually pick up insights about how your future opponents might play. Okay, so check out the guides on YouTube. I don't have any, apart from this one, I've got no guides, but I have full gameplays. Most of them have commentary, so you can check them out. And I try to explain what I'm doing, unless it's a game where I'm chatting to my opponent on voice call. So yeah, use these resources to your advantage, and you'll be able to see. You'll hopefully learn quite quickly from those. And of course, that doesn't mean you have to follow their strategy necessarily. Everyone's going to have their own slightly different way of doing things. But yeah, just check out the resources which are available, and that's partly why I make these videos. Actually, I do my full gameplays. I mean, the more experienced members of the community seem to enjoy watching the videos, but also for new players, if they find it useful, then for me that's a good job done. So yeah. Okay. The next thing too, as I said, I've just mentioned it. This game is difficult. It has a steep learning curve. If you're used to sort of deduction-based games or strategy-based games already, you might adapt to it very quickly, and that's great if that's the case. But don't stress about it if you start playing and it might not. You'll enjoy it hopefully, but it might not click, or maybe you don't get. For a few games, you might not get a victory. Don't be disheartened by that. And Yeah, that's a really important thing. You have to be, especially at the beginning, you have to be quite resilient and open-minded just to learn the game, basically. And we've been really lucky. There's been some new players joining the Discord community, and I've gone into voice calls with them where I'm teaching them or another player is teaching them, and I've been really impressed. They've come with a really open-minded mentality, and they just want to learn, and that's great. And even if they've lost, they're like, "Oh, well, we've learned things." So that's the main thing. So yeah, if you end up losing your first few games, don't be disheartened by it. You'll see yourself, like in terms of progress, how you're making, and I know you'll then discover new cards that you hadn't seen before, or new encounters that you've never seen before. But then you know them, and then next time you'll be able to look out for them, and you'll be constantly improving. And yeah, sure, at the moment, if you're playing against more experienced players, yeah, they're ahead of you on that curve, but because that learning curve is so steep, as you improve, you're going to be catching up to them faster than the more experienced players are improving. So eventually, in a relatively short space of time, you'll be able to have, really close competitive games, hopefully, against more experienced players. Even if just the final result is not going in your favor, you'll be pushing these more experienced players like really hard, and I've noticed that recently, like when I'm playing against some of like the newer members of the Discord community. Even though I'm winning the games, they're not pushovers, and they're really tough games, and I have to focus. And if I'm playing on autopilot, I'm going to lose them. So it's a real credit to the people who have joined so far, who have really picked up the game and really stuck with it. So yeah, I've realized by looking at my list now, sort of combining all of my things into one. But yeah, just be willing to learn, be really open-minded, and don't be put off by the steep learning curve. Once you get going, then you're going to be hooked and you're off. The other thing too is important in terms of learning. Be prepared to learn both sides. At the beginning, playing as Dracula is easier because you only have to control one person. The difficulty comes in that you don't know all the powers that the hunters may have and what moment they're going to play them. That's part of the learning process. But it's easier to play Dracula at the beginning because of the fact that there's only one person to control. But in order to get better as a Dracula player, playing the hunters is really good, because then you'll see the sort of cards that the hunters can get, and then realize as Dracula, I'm gonna have to think around that problem, and that they might have that card, so I should really prepare for that. And then same as the hunters, if you know what sort of powers Dracula can get and what sort of trail that Dracula can leave, then the hunters are gonna have to plan for that, basically. So yeah, learning both sides is definitely a good thing. A good way to do it is play Dracula initially, and then hopefully, feel free to say in the Discord community that you would like help learning the hunters. And a more experienced player will be willing to, if time zones and working schedules all line up, the experienced players will be willing to take a newer player under their wing and play, a 2v1 hunter, a game where you got two hunters against one Dracula. And it makes it easier then for the newer player, because the experienced player can do quite a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of like decision making, and you've only got 2 hunters to control, not 4 of them. So it makes it a little bit more accessible then to play the hunters, because there's a very steep learning curve for both sides, but especially for the hunters. You've got four people you have to try and control and working out which cards go where. But don't worry about your progress game to game, because sometimes games can just be weird. I've had it where I've had really close games, either victories or defeats, and the next game is a stomp one way or the other. It doesn't happen very often that there are stomps, but it can just happen that you get really quick games, just because Dracula gets really very quick matured things, and a very early hunter death that really sets the game back. Or the hunters find Dracula really quickly. It just depends. But you'll see it as you're playing the games over time. You'll realize that you're progressing, and the games are hopefully getting a lot more competitive and much closer. The other thing to realize too is, as I said, this is a tough game. So only play when you feel like it. I know you said that, in order to learn, you do have to play reasonably frequently. It doesn't have to be every day or anything. It all depends on you, and it also depends on how quickly you pick things up. But play only when you feel like it. I find it sometimes that when I play, depending on my mood or things that, like in real life, like work or whatever, or even just playing the game, it can get a bit tiring, because it is a very intense game if you're playing it, with always the mentality to win and you're against really difficult opponents. So if you feel that's the case, and then you need to take some breaks in between your games, so you're not playing every day, that's absolutely fine. Players often, I've seen it with some of the players, that when they have a little break, they'll come back fresh. Whereas if you're trying to grind with the game and just constantly playing because you want to learn as much as possible, you might end up burning out really quickly, and then you might not ever come back to it. So yeah, you got a lot to learn, but at the same time, like, pace yourself. Don't feel like you need to learn everything in a very short space of time. So that's what I did at the beginning. I mixed it up. I had a mixture of learning from actually playing the game, but also spectating other people's games, so I wasn't having to play, or watching guides and things on YouTube when I was just doing something else in my free time. So you can learn by doing those 3 different things, not just playing. But it's entirely up to you. Some people prefer to learn only by playing, so you'll have to work out which is best for you. The other thing too, I said, to be open-minded in terms of being willing to learn, but also be open-minded in terms of when you're playing the game. Fury of Dracula very much requires a sort of an adaptable mind when you're playing, and I was actually having a conversation with another player, Roscoe, about this evening, because we were teaching a newer player. And yeah, like, every player will have their strategy, and normally that stays more or less fixed, but because of depending on how the game is going, sometimes you're going to have to be adaptable, and you can't do it the way that you would normally do it. So yeah, be prepared to just realize, oh, I can't do this turn, I'm going to have to do something else, because if I don't, something's going to mature, or hunters are going to jump onto my location or whatever. Be willing to change what you want to do based upon how the game is progressing, basically. And the other thing too is be unpredictable. To play this game well, being unpredictable is quite a big factor. As both the hunters and Dracula, but it's more so as Dracula. When you play as Dracula, you realize you need to be unpredictable. Mixing up your style of play can really confuse your opponent. If you play the same way every time, your opponent will know what you're doing, and it'll get not easy to win, because it's not an easy game, but it'll become easier. So keep your opponent always on their toes. Changing the way you play. Sometimes don't make the obvious moves. Do different things. As the hunters, you can change your starting location sometimes, or the way that you move characters about to do psychic bond scans and all that sort of thing. Just mix it up every now and then, and sometimes it'll work out for you. And then if your opponent doesn't know exactly what you're going to do, it makes that game just a little bit more richer. It's fantastic. And lastly, I don't know how long I've been recording for. Hopefully it's not been too long, and hopefully this has been insightful. The last thing is just basically have fun. That's what games should be about, really. If you're not having fun, then there's not. I don't think there's much point. But I think the important thing is to understand where the fun comes from. At least for me, I can't speak for other people. But at least from my perspective, this game can be really intense and extremely challenging. But it can be so rewarding because of that. When I've had really, good matches, and they don't have to be wins either. Okay, I'm not saying this just for wins. It can be a really, close defeat. It can be such a, it'll be such a fun experience. And sometimes, yeah, the game can be a little bit anticlimactic, just depending on how it ends. But the good thing is, compared to the physical, the board game version, the games on digital edition are quicker, and they're normally done, within the 2-hour mark. Sometimes they can last only an hour, but normally I say more or less you need to allocate 2 hours to play this game, which is much better than playing maybe 3 or 4 hours in the physical edition. So, even though some games can be a little bit anticlimactic when they end, you've not committed as much of your time to it. And the thing is, yeah, some games are anticlimactic, but when you get a game that is so tense up until the final move, and it literally comes down to the final day, the final fight, Dracula's on very low HP, Hunters are on really low HP, then you realize how good this game is. And it just, for me, that happened very early on. It just basically sucked me in, and I'm just now hooked on it. It's absolutely fantastic. The important thing is, at least, if you're playing within your own group, if you've got a group of friends who play either the board game or the digital version, doesn't matter, you can kind of do what you like. You're within your own sort of group. But I would say, at least in terms of our Discord community, it's always a case of playing to win. It's not about making the game more interesting necessarily. Maybe some people might disagree with that, but for me, the fun comes in the chase and having a really good battle with a very competent Hunter player or a very competent Dracula player, or someone who's at the same level as you, and it becomes a really close game. That's for me. That's where I gain the satisfaction from this, not from the result necessarily, or that the game is made more interesting because a player decides to make a move which is maybe not optimal, but they're doing it just to make it a little bit more exciting. For me, the mentality should always be play to win, and that's hard. Like, as a new player, if you play against somebody like me who's a little bit more experienced, it can be a bit of a baptism of fire, to say the least. And yeah, you, as a new player, the lessons you learn at the beginning can be really harsh, and if you make mistakes, you can get punished for it really, very cruelly. But that's actually how you learn. You learn quicker that way. You learn from those those really big mistakes and those sort of cruel endings, but you remember them, and it means then you play so that you don't forget them, and you'll always play with those things in mind and trying to outwit your opponent in other ways. So that's really important. So yeah. Well, apologies, the UI has bugged out while we've been watching, so hopefully that hasn't bothered you, and I hope this video has been somewhat informative. If you're interested in joining the Discord community that we have, I'll leave links in the description below. If you're watching this video fairly soon after it's released. I'm going on my summer holidays very soon, so I'm actually not going to be around to play for a couple of months. But there'll still be videos on my channel with full gameplays, so feel free to check them out. But there's other people in the Discord community who I'm sure will be more than willing to help you out. Just go into the looking for Fury section and just say that you're new, and if you want help, feel free to say it. Don't be shy to ask, and we'll try and help you out. As I said, we're a friendly bunch, and we've got a very small community, but we want to have that sort of friendly connection between everybody. And so yeah, that's basically it, folks. So thanks for checking this out. If you found it insightful, then feel free to give a like and a comment. And also, to more experienced players, if you watch this, maybe you might not do so because if you're more experienced, but if you do and you think there's maybe something I've forgotten, then feel free to say so in the description or in the comment section below. I'd be interested to hear all your thoughts. And until then, take care, everybody, and see you in the next video very soon.